Well, we turn our attention now to some of the industrial action going on across the country. Well, Sylvester Ejiofor joins us this morning. He's the public service negotiator. Morning, and thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much.
Well, with the last time we had ASUP, that's for the polytechnics. You have the universities. You have electricity workers seem to have suspended, or they put it on hold from the last report. But you have the medical counterparts also joining in the fray, Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities, and you could almost go on and on. But do you think this is not much?
Well, in relative terms, not much if you look at the problems we have in the country and the fact that it is confined to the public sector, not the private sector.
The private sector even have this kind of cases as much as the public sector
Well,
does.
they do have, but don't forget that that's a sector which is depressed.
Okay, the private sector.
Yeah, the private sector. Like
Depressed?
Yeah, because
in what sense?
they are coping with a lot of unemployment, closures, casualizations, etc. But besides, one must admit that human resource management is more advanced in that sector. At times to a fault too, you know. So the fact that most big companies have a quite humane system of industrial relations that promotes understanding, and not just the fire brigade type as you have in the public sector.
When you say this is not much compared to what goes on in society,
Yeah.
I don't. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. Are you saying that we should have much more industrial action than what we already have?
Well, one is not promoting anarchy as such, but if you realize that strikes are vivid manifestations of discontentment, and the society itself portrays a situation of tension, social tension, deprivation, it impacts on people's behavior in the workplace. To that extent, one would say that Nigerians are quite tolerant, quite reasonable in reactions. So strike, manifests discontentment, which exists in larger society.
Yeah. But as a public service negotiator, I mean, if you say then that, well, compared to what we have going on in the society, can one then infer from your comments that the quality of public servants we have leaves a lot to be desired?
No. I will tell you with every honesty and humility that the public sector harbors one of the best brains in the country. It's a very wide sector in any case. Now, but the public believes that that's a waste. From what I know, you have the best skills in that sector, but unfortunately, the least remunerated in relative terms.
With respect to their ability to negotiate with these discontented fellows, how good would you say they are?
You see, the point is, why should we negotiate when there is crisis? And if you look at the character of the crisis in the public sector now, from what you enumerated, they are not disagreements based on inability to reach agreement, but in most cases, implementation. Why that? Then there's a lack somewhere. From my experience, our public sector IR managers, either they don't have enough encouragement from the political masters. They wait until things get out of hand. Look at each of the crises we have now. The crises do not emanate, or did it emanate from inability to negotiate an agreement, but in most cases, indifference to implementing agreements reached. Why?
Indifference.
Yes.
Because let's look at the education sector, for instance. ASU, then yesterday, as Chamberlain rightly pointed out, ASUP, and they say by tomorrow the schools, the polytechnics will be shut. And NUT, which also controls the high school, secondary schools, and even primary school, they say they will go on a solidarity strike, meaning a whole sector from top to bottom is about to be shut. And we have the medical association and so many other bodies. How do we get into all of this? When you talk about public service negotiation, is it that we don't negotiate, we don't talk, we don't discuss before we get to the option of strike?
You see, what is a strike? Strike is an element of discontentment. Every attempt to resolve problems hit the rocks. Then you are left with no option. And look at that sector. That's a sector in which the average employer there is a knowledge employer, is a knowledge employee. It's not daft. And people who go on strike, they are rational human beings. They have other options. But whenever that thing fails, but what I'm saying is that in the public sector, don't forget that the character of the employer there is dual. The employer represents the sovereign authority of the state, of the country. And equally, it's an employer in its own right. He hires and fires. And from my experience, the first character of being the sovereign authority of the country, in most cases, makes it difficult for them to negotiate in what I would say, negotiate from the point of view of equality. Because when you negotiate on the table, it's presumed that both of you, the parties concerned, at that table are equal. But the other type of being the sovereign authority of the nation, oftentimes beclouds their role as employers. But in the private sector, you have a typical employer-employee relationship. And both have a commitment to reach understanding or agreement. And the point of agreement is the point at which what is affordable is what is acceptable.
Is that not the same case with the public sector?
No, but if you look at all the cases now, none of them is a typical case of disagreement on the negotiating table, but on the implementation. Then how do you explain an agreement reached in 2009, in 2010, 2011? There's now a crisis. None of them have said that, no, this agreement is not real.
Yeah, but if you say it's the point of implementation, I mean, why would, if I were to come to an agreement with someone, wouldn't I factor all of that into an agreement? What is the component of the agreement then?
That is the problem. You see, our governments are a little bit, well, I won't say much about their character. There's always this quasi-military mentality. There's crisis, our concern is how do we douse the crisis, but not how do you solve what led to the crisis.